Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Welcome back to Construct Your Life. This is Austin Linney here, and I have the honor of meeting Ryan. I got introduced to Matt. I go through these threads of groups. When I meet one, I get the other seven, and I think I'm in that group right now. And every guy I've met has been amazing, great father, great business person, but more importantly, just a forthright, great human. And so it's awesome to be able to connect with you today and share your story with our audience. So I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, talk about where you want to. We'll go from there.
Yeah, let's do it. So I am a leadership professor and leadership development consultant. I'm in Southern California. I'm a professor at Cal State Fullerton. If you've heard of Cal State Fullerton, you're probably into athletics because they have a great baseball program. But we actually have the fourth largest business school in the United States. So it's a huge operation, and it's a really great thing to be a part of. And I get to do what I love. I get to do research and teaching on leadership. And that then goes on and fuels the consulting that I do with organizations all over the world. So I work with organizations like CVS Health, T-Mobile, Ford, Mondelez. So, and in fact, in just a couple of weeks, I get to go to Australia and work with the company down under. So looking forward to that. And I think the perspective that I bring to leadership development really is applicable to just life development, development. And really the focus is about not what do we need to do to be effective. There's a lot out there on that. Not that it's bad, but I think it's more valuable to focus on what do we need to be effective. And that's a very different conversation.
Well, it's really interesting, right? I my fiance, to get me on more of the universal stuff, and always been a big fan of the law of attraction. But life's funny, right? I had no idea you were going to book today. I had no idea that we were going to chat today, but you picked today, and here we are. And my Twitter post was, before I started buying small businesses, I spent 6 months only studying leadership. And that was the post that I put out this morning. So I think it's absolutely, I think it's amazing. And a young kid asked me the other day, he said, if you could do it all over again, what would you study? And I said, I would study leadership, and I would never stop studying it. And that could be leadership of oneself. It could be leadership of your community. And so this is an extremely fascinating topic for me. What I want to do before we get into how to be a great leader, I want to go the opposite way. I want to go, what I think, and this is just because I'm out there, people like your, my dad generation, they led through power, force, and kind of do what I say. That don't fly anymore. Nope. And so what leadership practices have you seen recently that are getting kind of removed from business altogether, that don't work anymore?
Yeah. Well, let me give you a couple of analogies. So I'm going to give you a couple thoughts. One thought is, if we want to be an effective leader, we don't want to be somebody that others have to follow. That's the command and control that you talked about, right? You have to follow me. You do what I say. That doesn't, to your point, that doesn't work anymore. In order to be an effective leader, we need to be somebody that others want to follow, not have to follow. And the leaders that we want to follow, I call them gardener-minded leaders. So I'm not even that much of a green thumb. Are you much of a green thumb?
No.
Okay, but I think I haven't had a green thumb contradict anything that I'm about.
I like to be out in nature. Does that count?
I think you'll get it, right? So a gardener knows three things. A gardener knows that a seed cannot sprout, a plant cannot grow, and a tree cannot bear fruit just by forcing that to occur, right? But we can create the conditions under which a seed will sprout, a plant will grow, and a tree will bear fruit. And the better the conditions, the greater the growth and the greater the yield. And so what we find so much in the leadership space is largely driven by business leaders, right? There's more than leadership than that. But the typical approach to business leadership has been, I want to try to force the plant to grow, and I want to force the fruit off of the tree. And what we find is that type of behaviors may result in growth and fruit in the short term, but it's terrible for the long term. And the best leaders are really these gardener-minded leaders, where they are focused on cultivating the right conditions for others to thrive. And when we cultivate the right conditions for others to thrive, that's when people want to follow us and they don't feel like they have to follow us. Does that resonate with you, or does that make sense?
No, it's so perfect. So we're closing on a company in 2 weeks. It's a HVAC and plumbing company. A large section of the guys are 50 and above, 60. They've been in the space for a minute. And then I have another group of guys who are 18, 19, 20, 25. And so there's two types of leadership that has to exist within me as the CEO, where the old guys are basically saying, leave me alone, just let me go do my work. And the young guys, I have to see something in them that I can cultivate over the next 5 years to become my new leaders. And so there's almost this complexity of different layers of leadership within inside the own leadership bucket, which I find, forever fascinating.
Yeah. So, I mean, in some ways, it seems like you've got succulents on one side and you've got like orchids on the other side, right? And as a gardener, you've got to treat that differently. And I love how you used the word complexity. That's actually one of the things that's becoming increasingly studied in the academic realm. And what we're finding is that part of our development journey as people should be an enhancing of our complexity. And one of the ways to think about that is, to what degree do I have different hats in my closet? And to what degree is it easy for me to take off my current hat and put on a different hat? How easy can we shift those hats? So as we increase in our complexity, we develop more hats and we're able to shift between those hats more easily. And when we have those abilities, we become a more complex being ourselves. When we're a more complex being, we have we do a better job of leading through complexity.
One of my favorite men's coaches, lives in San Clemente, said that the driver of the car doesn't change, the vehicle changes. When you're deep rooted in who you know and what you operate, like perfect example, I'm just using it because I just spent an entire week there and I'm moving up there next week. It's a blue collar business. They're in the middle of nowhere. I'm not going to wear slacks to work. It's not that I don't like wearing slacks when I play golf or travel. I do, but it's not needed. It's not needed to be above them, right? But on the other end, my friend also said, you don't show off your fancy truck. But that could be an inspiration to the younger guys, but put off the older guys. So once again, now we have, this that's why for me, and I'm just talking about myself, that's why I moved away, because the only thing I care about in this world is impact. That's it. Like I help people at scale. Well, the only way to do that the way I wanted to, not the only way, but one of the main small businesses. Well, when I got into small businesses, I'm like, wow, this thing is the emotions of the 30 people in my place and how they feel about leadership and how their previous boss was for 30 years. Like, I just love the complexity that you're never going to show up and have the same day as a leader. And now I've been named CEO of the first 4 or 5 businesses that we buy. It was a choice that my soul said you have to take, even though I interviewed 3 of them for 5 months. Is like, this business needs my fire, my passion, my heart. And then when we're at like a certain number, then it needs a more stoic kind of level out. I'm going to take it from 20 million to 100 million, but like having the leadership capability to know I can get it off the ground. But once once we're in mid-flight, Austin's kind of checked out, but like that's taking a lot of work. And I'm sure, the work that you do with, companies, like there's so many a different department needs a different leader, like a graphic designing department of a massive corporation is going to need something different than the engineers are going to need.
Yeah.
Right. Do you see that a lot?
Yes, for sure. But I do want to, that's speaking to this complexity part of it. But there is another element to consider, that we need similar across anywhere we might lead. And that is, and I already feel you kind of stepping into this. That's the motives behind whatever we do when we lead. Mm-hmm. What is driving us? What is fueling us? And the thing that's interesting about this, and what I've learned working with hundreds of leaders, is that most leaders are not dialed into or in tune with their own internal motives. Of course, everybody thinks they are, but this is where the self-awareness and self-leadership piece comes in, is to what degree am I fully awakened to my motives? And I might dare say that is a lifelong journey, right? That is, it's not something easy to do.
You're never gonna, and the seasons shift,
Yeah. But what we have found, and this is, let me share with you some really fascinating research. And this comes from the field of developmental psychology. So developmental psychology is all about studying how human beings develop throughout their lifetime. But 90% of developmental psychology has focused on child development, right? If anybody's in college and they take a human development class, they're going to learn that there's different childhood stages as one goes from infant to adult. And children, we see them develop right before our eyes, and they develop almost automatically. It's kind of a function of age. But what a small set of developmental psychologists have found is that when they study adult development, is that adults can develop. So that was an assumption that they busted before. So adults can develop. There are 3 different adult development stages. And what they also found is that most adults never develop in adulthood. So 64% of all adults stay at the same level of development that they entered adulthood with. 35% get to a second level, and only 1% get to the third level. And I share just these levels and this background because I do think it's helpful, if it's okay, to step into what are the differences between these levels, because it'll help us to make sense of the motives that are underlying why we do what we do. Would that be okay?
Of course. Mm-hmm.
All right. Mm-hmm. And my guess is that you sense this first level with a lot of your employees that you're now going to start leading,
well,
right?
and not to mention, I have 2 different coaching segments where it's 42 and up, and I have 27 and down. And so there's no middle ground, and it's been I'm an entirely different coach with each group, 100%.
Yeah. So good. So again, this first level, 64% of all adults operate at this level. And when we're at each of these levels, our body has an internal operating system, and at each level, our body's internal operating system are programmed to fulfill different needs. And the needs that our body's programmed to fulfill speaks to our motives. So at this first level, our needs that we're wired to fulfill are safety, comfort, and belonging. We want to stand in, right? And when we're at this level, whether we're currently at this level or not, we've all been there. But when we're at this level, we like to join and identify with groups and tribes that will help us to feel safe, comfortable, and like we belong. That could be a family, that could be a social or friend group, that could be, and oftentimes for us, it's an employer. So most employees, when they enter an organization, they're looking for safety, comfort, and belonging. They don't come into the organization and say, hey, I want to take charge here. They say, no, you just tell me what to do and I will do it, provided you keep me safe, comfortable, and feeling like I belong. So if we're operating at this base level, doesn't mean that we're a bad person. These are most people, and I would say most of my family members operate at this level, and I really like them. This is just speaking to the complexity of our internal operating system, if you will. So that's the first level. Does that level make sense to you?
100%.
Okay.
I would
Second
say
level,
I would say it's more like 90%, but I'll take the 64%. Yeah. No, I love it.
yeah. So the second level, you're going to see a huge shift in our needs. So now our needs at the second level are to stand out, advance, and get ahead. So no longer, in fact, we are willing to be unsafe, uncomfortable, and not belong in order to stand out, advance, and get ahead. We come to this place where we start to develop our own independent beliefs. We're willing to push back against our tribe's beliefs. And when we develop these beliefs, we want to run with them. We want to be leaders. We want to take charge. And while 35% of all adults operate at this level, 85% of executives operate at this level. Right? They kind of see that there's a whole bunch of Mind 1.0 people that are willing to give up their power and independence. And they kind of say, well, let me get you to work for me so that you can help me stand out, advance, and get ahead. And they said, yep, provided you keep me safe, comfortable, and feeling like I belong. So that's the second level. And that's where, as I mentioned, most leaders operate. Does that level make sense to you?
Yep, 100%.
All right, the last level, and then we can, I'll be interested just in your thoughts on this, this framework. The last level, or the top level, this level 3, is our needs are to contribute, add value, and lift others. So at that first level, we want to stand in. At that second level, we want to stand out. Well, at this third level, we don't care about standing in, and we don't care about standing out. We just care about contributing, adding value, and lifting others. And this is where we move from, at that first level, as a dependent thinker. The second level is an independent thinker. This third level is an interdependent thinker. And so when I heard you say, when I go golfing with my circle, we're talking about, do we scale or do we just build a great business, right? Implicit in that discussion is, particularly with the scaling, is there's an underlying motive. The motive can be different. It could be two ways, right? It could be, I want to stand out, advance, and get ahead more. Or it could be, I want to contribute, add value, and lift more people. And depending upon where we come from on that, we are going to operate as a completely different leader. And that's where we need to get in touch with these motives. And so hopefully understanding this framework, at least for me, helps me understand, what are my motives? Where am I coming from? Because I need to check in with my needs. Do I need to stand in? Do I need to stand out? Or am I truly focused on contributing, adding value, and lifting others?
It's so wild, because in the last, you broke it down better than I've ever heard it. In the last, year and a half, everything for me has switched more to that 1%, where I don't need any of the credit anymore. And we're in a different phase of the business now, where we're building long-term wealth and affecting communities. And the only way to do that is to not get the accolades anymore. Push the other people in front. And I've got my core group of guys that want to stand out. But then, the large majority, like you said, just want a great place to work, and they want a beer after work, and they want to go hunting, and they want to work hard for the company. Like, how can you be mad about any of that stuff? Yeah. Where I think leaders, somebody asked me 2 days ago on Twitter, what's a skill that you want to learn this year that's your number one? And I said, I want to be an egoless leader. I want to truly lead from a place of caring about that person, and always, but see, here's where it gets tricky. And this is why I would love now there's more people involved. Now I have a chief of staff. Now I have an assistant, an office manager. So they have to know how I'm thinking in order to make a conscious decision. So that's where it gets, now we're getting into the leadership culture conversation.
But yes, and that's, when we operate at that highest level, we do a better job of being a gardener leader, right? You need to cultivate the right conditions that will allow your people to thrive. And you're not creating those conditions because you want the success and the accolades, but because you want them to be successful. what you're touching on with your goal of being an egoless leader, which is hugely aspirational. Like I love that, because I think it's anybody could step into that. One of the things that is valuable to recognize, and we've already started to feel into this, is that there are two different types of development for ourselves. So let me classify these. One of these types of development is called horizontal development. This is our typical form of development. Horizontal development is adding knowledge and skills to who we are so that we can do more. It's kind of like adding an app onto an iPad, right? That's great, because a new app broadens our functionality. We can now do more than what we could previously. That's why people, they like degrees, because it signifies I've got a certain app on my iPad. Or if I take a certain college class, let's say accounting, I download the accounting app. Well, so now I could balance a budget sheet. I can now do accounting things. But just because I have a degree or an accounting app, does that improve my ability to navigate the change, pressure, uncertainty, and complexity in my world? No. Right? If we want that, we need more than just an app download. We need an operating system upgrade. And that introduces the second form of development, which is when we go from one level to the next in that framework. And that's what we would classify as vertical development. Vertical development is not adding an app, it's upgrading our internal operating system. And when you talk about becoming an egoless leader, what that has to entail is vertical development, because horizontal development isn't going to help. You just gaining more knowledge and more skills isn't going to help. It's actually vertical development is when we fully step into it. It's a refining and even a healing of our body's nervous system. So, and we are to what you're kind of feeling into, and as you see with these three different levels, we go through the process of putting off self-focused needs, and that allows us to focus on that contribution, the lifting others, and the adding value.
And when you're going vertical, is there ever an end to the vertical, or is it just constant?
Well, it's a lifelong journey for sure. Like, I don't think it ever ends. But I think you could find milestones, and that's what's helpful with the framework. It gives us a sense of where we're at. And then, okay, where am I at? And then where do I go from here?
And I think it's interesting, right? Because what I dance, and by the way, guys, anybody's listening, I'm just putting myself on the firing line today, so you can all enjoy. Part of what makes me great is I'm 100% empathetic and can touch people's souls and within 2 minutes. And part of what makes me terrible is I could touch people's souls in 2 minutes, and it's like the exact thing that makes me great rips me apart inside. And so what I've been fighting up against is trying to be a little more stoic. We're getting into the millions. The employee count is doubling, tripling, quadrupling. So my emotional state, which makes me fiery, great, and passionate, also can, take down the whole, empire too. So yeah, it's been I just turned 40 a couple of weeks ago. And so, like those things are, with age, you're getting a little calmer, but, and so it's like, it's interesting, right? Because you can get me on a topic and I'll get all lit up and fired up, but it's like picking those dances and like the perfect example. I'll just use an example. There's a guy at work who's going through some things right now. He's a good guy. He's actually one of the sweetest people ever. He's not a negative person, but he has a negative mindset. And everybody's like, oh, it's like terrible. I'm like, dude, give me like 3 months with this guy. He'll be fine. Like, because I've already been through it. And you're like, and they see it because they just see one-dimensional thinking. I'm like, oh, dude, he's not really upset. Like, but because I see myself in him because I was that guy. And so, and so when, I truly believe that, I spent 20 years in hospitality, selling wine, hotels, high-end restaurants. I've had millions on millions of conversations with people from all walks of life. Like, that's been my training ground, right? And so, my advice to anybody, and I'm sure, when you're speaking, is you're also leading through different generations of knowledge too. right? Especially if you're at a big company, you're leading through a 50-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 20-year-old. They all have a different lens.
Yep.
And I think, your comment about finding that's the way we business consult, is let's find the common thread that means anything to everybody. And then we can kind of hit the target out there, right?
Yep.
When you're out there doing your coaching, have you worked with companies that have like 1,000 employees or like 500? Like, how do you go about attacking something like that?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the largest company I've worked with is Deutsche Telekom, which is T-Mobile over in Europe. And they've got 300,000 employees, right? So and I've been working with not their top 100 leaders, but from 100 to 5,000 is the group of leaders that I've been working with. And this is where, I mean, you see it in the larger, it's easier to see in the larger organizations like this. But to your point is, again, we're coming back to being a gardener-minded leader. How do we cultivate the right conditions for our people to thrive? And you just touched on what I would say is the number one thing a leader needs to focus on to cultivate those conditions. And this number one thing has come about because of my studying what I would call these level 3 leaders. So these leaders are people like Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Alan Mulally when he was at Ford, Ed Catmull at Disney Animation and Pixar Animation, Mary Barra at GM, Indra Nooyi at PepsiCo. Even I would say Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., like there is a single thread that I would say is their number one focus across all of these leaders. And that is leading with a clear, inspirational, and stakeholder-centric purpose. Right? We got to give them the why. And that why has got to be something that is bigger than ourselves and about serving and adding value to others, whatever that might be. And the very best leaders are able to do that. Like when Satya Nadella came in as CEO of Microsoft, he said the C in CEO stands for curator of culture. That is my number one. Culture is the number one job that I have as a CEO. Now, I haven't heard a lot of CEOs say that, and Satya Nadella happens to be one of the best. And that's because he's operating at that third level. So to cultivate the right conditions, we've got to lay the right foundation. And that foundation has got to be something that takes their eyes off of them and puts it on serving something bigger than them. And that's what a clear, inspirational, and stakeholder-centric purpose will do.
It's the only way that you keep gas in your tank is to have something so ridiculously big, right? I heard it a while back, you have to have a vision big enough for others to fit inside of it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's my thing, right? Like that's the thing, right? Because like most people, I'm guilty through my 20s, most people create a vision and it's just for them. Like, and you're trying to get these other people on board. And they're like, I don't see it. I don't see it. Right?
Let me give you a couple of examples. One example, this comes from a company who they focus on medical documentation. They literally touch 1 billion customers a year, right? Because I mean, if you go into a doctor's office and you're filling out forms, like you're touching this company. So inside conversations, the CEO will tell me, I think we have the opportunity to change the medical field. And that's huge. But then I had a coaching call with the chief operating officer, the COO, and I asked her, how do you measure success? And she said, double-digit growth year over year. And I'm like, no, like if I tell you those 3 levels again, like the first level is standing in, the second level is standing out, the third one is adding value or creating value. Like, where are they at? That's clearly that second level. Like, because I want double-digit growth so that I can stand out to my superiors or whoever that might be. So that's one example. Here's another example. I'm working with a credit union. It's one of the largest credit unions in Canada. And I asked them, what is your purpose? and they said and it's a French Canadian company, and so they had to translate it into English for me, but it is essentially, our purpose is to ensure our prosperity so that our customers will be prosperous. And I said, who comes first, you or your customers? And they said, I guess us. I was like, do you find that problematic at all? Like, even what, couldn't we flip that? Couldn't we say our purpose is to ensure the prosperity of our customers so that we become prosperous?
Yes.
Like, which one feels more valid to you? And they kind of sheepishly said, probably that second one feels more valid, right? So both of those are just examples of how these are level 2 leadership groups that they're not laying the appropriate foundation. They're not creating the appropriate environment or context for their people to thrive. And that's gonna, here's the thing. The vertical altitude, as we talk about vertical development, the vertical altitude of an organization's leaders sets the ceiling for the organization. So as we as leaders vertically develop, we raise the ceiling for our organization. And it's my guess that that's kind of what I sense from you. As you say, I want to become an egoless leader. To me, what that's saying is I want to raise my elevation, which then will raise the ceiling for the success of these organizations that I'm leading.
And I want to talk about your books before we get out of here, but like what people see is like, okay, so I'm the CEO of this company. We have 30 employees. That's great. Okay, so there's 30 people that are affected. No. Okay. They all have 2 kids. They have a wife. They have brothers and sisters. They're spending money in the community. So now it's the way that we describe it is there's this tentacle of impact, right? The Verizon store that I'm buying the iPads from is now listening to my podcast saying, hey man, can I come work for you? Like, I'm just doing business with him. And so I think we as people need to get back, technology is great. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, we have to understand that even behind the technology, unless you're talking about AI, there's a human, and there's still a human behind AI. And so like, I tend to, as a business owner, go back to the tactical stuff, shaking hands. One of the reasons why I went to the RV, because I can shake people's hands, be in their presence, and so like, yes, this might be easier to do it this way, but I've flown up once a month to go sit down with the owner in person because I think it's important. This is a big transaction for his career, his life, right? And so like, I get that it might be easier to do that way, but go out of your way sometimes and do the extra thing. And I think your staff and anybody that you're leading is gonna really appreciate that.
No, you're spot on, because part of that creating the right conditions is investing in the people. Like yourself, you've got to get to know them. You got to build good relationships with the people that you're leading. In fact, that was what my dissertation was on. We looked at there's a variety of factors that we know helps the connection between the leader's behaviors and the follower's performance. And what we found is that the most important factor in the middle of that is having high quality relationships with those that we lead, right? If we have high quality relationships with those that we lead, our behaviors as leaders will translate into higher levels of performance of our employees. If we don't have good relationships with those that we lead, our behaviors will not translate into higher performance, right? We may be working really hard, but if we don't have those good relationships, we're just spinning in our hamster wheel and getting nowhere. And so I love, even in just having this conversation, hopefully by laying out this framework and even listeners could sense this, just in having a conversation with you, you sense where you're at in your vertical development journey, right? 100%. Are you done? No. But you're stepping into wanting to be an egoless leader, devoted to relationships, right? These are cultivating those right conditions.
And what nobody talks about is the gravity of the responsibility on my shoulders. Like, let's talk about the CEO of the 300,000 person company. Like, I would venture to guess, I don't know the guy, but yeah, he's got to hit his numbers for his shareholders. But I would imagine what keeps me up at night more would be the 300,000 people's families that I'm supporting. Right. And so I have a goal. I said it, I decided it 3 months ago that I want to win an award. It's not a sales goal. I want to win the best place to work. If I win that award, I promise you everything else is going to take care of itself. I spent time, used to live in San Antonio. USAA is in the top 5 every freaking year. And guess what? Their company's just growing. I don't know any of their revenue goals, but I know they're in the top, best to work for, right? So, so you got 2 books behind you. Looks like you wrote both of those, did you? Yes,
I did. Yeah. We had Success Mindsets, I guess, on this side. Success Mindsets came out first. That came out about almost 3 years ago. That's a book that helps us to deepen our self-awareness about the quality of our mindsets. What I've learned for myself and also leaders that I've worked with is that we generally think we have really good mindsets. But even though they feel right and they feel good to us, doesn't mean that they're great mindsets. And so in that, there's a framework with 4 different sets of mindsets. We can awaken to the quality of our mindsets. There's also a mindset assessment that comes with my book, and it's also on the website. So that's Success Mindsets. The next one, which just came out about 4 months ago, is The Elevated Leader, which is all about vertical development. So that's largely what I've kind of emphasized is the content in that book. And it's a way to help us understand where we are at in terms of our vertical altitude and how do we level up so that we can be a more positive influence in the lives of others.
Perfect. I'm going to buy 5 copies and next week and give it out to all my leaders and make it a required readment as we continue to grow this company. So
awesome. And I look forward to your feedback. If I could help in any way, would love to do so.
Wonderful. And if people want to find out about the books or find more about you, how would they do that?
Best place is my website, ryangottfredson.com. And then probably next best would be connecting on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Well, it's really, I dropped out of college 3 times myself. So it's nice to talk to a lovely professor because we didn't always see eye to eye. So guys, if you got some value from this episode, send it to a friend and we'll see you next time.